Okay, so welcome to this webinar presented by TrySnow Tech in partnership today with Allegiance Advisory Group. Because we have our panelist today is Brian Stuckey, and he's from Allegiance. Okay. So for those of you who don't know Brian, well, Brian's been working for nearly 3 decades in designing and implementing business rules and process management systems for both commercial and federal clients. So Brian is now at he's also at his third year as co-chairman of the MISMO Brew, so the Business Rules Exchange Workgroup Committee at MISMO. So if you're working in financial services, I assume you know about MISMO, but for the others, MISMO is the governing standard body for the mortgage industry. So his efforts has resulted in finalizing the decision model and notation, so the DMN standard, which is going to be part of our discussion today, as an official mortgage industry standard. So Brian will be leading this session today, and he will also be available at the end for Q&A session. I know some of you already sent some questions, so we'll get there at the end. And his presentation should last about around 30 minutes. And so for those of you who want to stay with us and ask some questions and stay for the answers as well, well, you're more than welcome to use the questions widget on the GoToWebinar panel. So, and well, I'll introduce myself as well. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jonathan. I'm leading the communications and marketing department here at TrySnow Tech. So the methodology well, all the presentation of Brian, all of his methodology is supported by TrySnow Tech's Digital Enterprise Suite. So if you have any questions specific to the technology, I invite you to simply reply to the follow-up email that I will send you probably tomorrow with a link to the recording, so you can share it with your colleagues, with some friends, and you can watch back some parts that were more of interest to you. So if you don't know TrySnow Tech, well, TrySnow Tech is a solution provider. Our software is called the Digital Enterprise Suite. It's a cloud-based software that helps businesses in their digital transformation efforts. So in this, what we call the digital transformation revolution has been ongoing for a few years, and it's driven by the desire to create value both for the organization and the customer. And well, what we think is that this is only possible by reviewing existing business models, but foremost by creating new business models that are closer to what customers expect from businesses now. And finding ways to make the right decision, to make the right business decision every time is one of the ways to create value for both sides. And this is what will be the focus on in this webinar. So like Brian is just about to expose, decision modeling isn't, well, in particular using the DMN standard, which is going to be part of the discussion as well today, is a must if you want your organization to make quality decisions in the most consistent way. But enough for me. I'm letting Brian take the stage, so I'll just have him show his screen. So again, don't hesitate to send questions if anything comes up to your mind. We'll get there at the end, and if it's more a particular case, then we can respond to it after the webinar. So with this, I will give you control, Brian, and the audience is yours.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. And I also want to give a thanks to TrySnow Tech for sponsoring this webinar. I know they've had a series of webinars and will continue to present these going forward with some great topics. So hopefully you'll be able to attend a number of them over the course of the next year. Now, as Jonathan said, my name is Brian Stuckey. I can say now that I worked in artificial intelligence the first time it was cool and a fun thing to say. And we didn't really talk about it for a long time, but once again, it's come to the forefront and become very popular, so I'm excited about that. I've been able to have a seat over the years to see what we used to call expert systems. They've evolved to business rule systems, to business rule management systems, and now ultimately to decision management systems. Most of the focus of my work to date has been in financial services and banking and mortgage, credit card processing, insurance, with a little government work here and there. But the things we're going to talk about are really relevant to a variety of industries. And when you can look at some of the same pain points and problems faced, I think the topics here are going to be as applicable in a variety of industries as they are to financial service. I've been able to work closely with a number of vendors like TrySnow Tech over the years, written, designed, built, and implemented a variety of rule and process systems. And I'm probably as excited right now as I have for quite a while of what the future is going to hold because of some of the changes in the industry, both technology and financial services, that we'll discuss here today. I'm going to take us back a little bit to set the conversation here, but I did want to give you a quote first that came a little less than a year ago from the CEO of IBM. And she said that decisions was going to be a 2 trillion, that's trillion with a T, dollar industry in the next 10 years. Now, that's covering a wide variety of things, but a number of the topics here, this is where it's happening. This is going to be very crucial and something to keep your eyes on as you work forward in your respective industries. Now, if you go back to 2008, we kind of all remember what happened there in terms of the mortgage industry and within the economy, with the collapse first of mortgage industry and then nearly the global economy to boot afterwards. Ripples were felt worldwide throughout financial services. Certainly, I can recommend the book and the movie as well, The Big Short, to really give you a feel for everything that happened during that time period. What's interesting is what happened immediately after in terms of the mortgage industry. We saw interest rates, of course, drop dramatically from where they had been, in some cases to some lows we hadn't seen for quite a while. Not surprisingly, there was a corresponding jump in originations. A large part of those were refinances, and people took the opportunity to do a little bit better on their mortgages that they held. Now, for somebody that worked from the technical side of this industry and had systems in place, we were excited because we thought we would be busier than we had ever been before, with all of the volume coming in and all of the concern over doing things right. The kind of systems we've been developing were going to be crucial. And so we were extremely excited. However, that didn't really turn out to be the case. In fact, technology took a lot of the blame for what happened and in the lead up to 2008. And, a quote that it got us into the trouble that we're in today. At a roundtable discussion sponsored by Origination News during a Mortgage Bankers Association conference, participants talked about returning to historically handwritten underwriting and the problem with systems not being able to assess or pick up what they called the 4th C, or character of a borrower. At that point, of course, systems not meant to assess the character of the borrower. We also heard from National Mortgage News that a variety and frankly, a great number of companies were turning off automated loan decision tools for manual processing because they didn't trust technology. So understand this, they're putting things back subjectively in the hands of underwriters as opposed to using the systems. And as a result, we saw nearly a 50% reduction in loans that came through automated channels. Now, this was really kind of shocking to see this attitude held, and I would have to say I would attribute it largely to trying to find a scapegoat. There were some problems with the systems that were built that we'll discuss here shortly, but this was not the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem simply is that they bypassed, for set in overrides for these systems to basically push as many mortgages as possible through. Given some of the loans that were granted during that time period, I can virtually guarantee you there was no automated system in place that would have validated those at the time. That's what the problem really was. But nonetheless, there is a perception that needs to be overcome. So this kind of gets us to where we are now, and we've got some challenges that have been going on within the mortgage industry. And the first is simply in terms of regulations. And this is largely true of any financial services industry out there. And I'll give some examples here from the U.S. mortgage industry because it's just a perfect one of the amount of regulation that is necessary now. To start with, when you're looking to get a mortgage, you've got to determine what kind of loan product you want and what the monthly payments are going to be, what kind of property you're buying, and a number of things that just go into filling out the application. Once that's done, the application has to be underwritten and go through some of the underwriting systems we've been talking about. But if that mortgage is ultimately going to be sold to the GSEs, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, there's another set of regulations that you've got to go look at. And if that's being sold by any big seller, they undoubtedly have a master contract with the GSE that you've got to make sure you're going to be applicable for. Once it's through there, we have to ensure that we followed all of the truth in lending and integrated disclosure acts to ensure that the borrowers are being treated fairly and are getting complete information. And lastly, I think I'm back here now, I believe, just I've lost connection for a moment. Ultimately, we have to look and make sure that the CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, is going to be collecting data on all of these loans. And there's a whole other set of information that needs to be sent and processed by those industries. We've got a lot of stuff going on. So what's the impact? Well, we ultimately were able to stabilize the housing industry. And that was, of course, paramount to our concern for what we needed to do. But in doing so, of course, we did this by a lot more restrictive regulations. We saw origination costs that doubled. There's more services, there's more paperwork, and there's more time. The result of all of that is that getting a mortgage these days is just harder. Processing costs are higher. There's more paperwork, longer waits for approval, fewer loan products, again, because of all the stricter lending rules. So we're seeing increased regulations to deal with, and we've got some technology that is not being relied upon by the financial service industry, which is a really, really bad combination. So let's talk a little bit about the technology that they've been giving all the blame here for. Business rule management systems have been around for a while. I mean, expert systems literally started decades ago. Business rule management systems are prevalent in the financial services industry. They've been around here probably in mortgage since the early 1990s. And the idea here was very clear. If we separate the rules from code, we can allow business users to manage and deploy out to a system on their own. The idea of having rapid change and continuous improvement of services, moving towards a zero time to market. If we extract that piece of the logic that is going to be volatile and is going to change a lot, we can get it in the hands of business users so then they can handle everything. The system will become more agile, will support a business driven need for change and be a lot better off. And these systems did have a tremendous amount of success, but they didn't really get us quite all the way. And I would argue that they at least failed to meet all of the expectations. The first problem was simply that these systems were expensive. The platforms themselves cost a lot of money, and by doing so, they eliminated a large part of the market that could really use them. And you can see on this graph that large banks are spending $1,000 per loan. The smaller ones are averaging about a quarter of that simply because they don't have that technology overhead. They can't pay for it. They can't do as much. We also saw the problem that these systems took a great deal of very niche either had to rely on the vendors themselves or buy some expensive consulting resources. Now, I can't complain much because I've been able to do this for a long time and keep busy. But you're really seeing a large part of the market excluded from the technology. The other problem that I think we saw is that simply we weren't getting as much use and as much play out of the idea that business users can take over for things. We found in the last few years that over 60% of the places that employed a business rule approach still managed their rules via the normal software development lifecycle. Sometimes it just was the case that solutions with a full-scale end user-facing rules administration overwhelmed the change management system infrastructure, and they weren't really ready for it. And they didn't always address all the key aspects of being able to do that rapid change, so they didn't bother doing it, and they moved rule changes through like they would the rest of the software. You also saw a problem that a lot of the business users themselves just didn't ever acquire the skills or the confidence to do the rule changes themselves. And the complexity and variety of logic representations still weren't enough. So bottom line, we did not have business people, the ones that should be managing the rules, actually empowered for change. So the platforms got more sophisticated, but the return on investment got worse. You know, we've got these two plays now that are the driving forces. We've got a lot of regulation, and we've got technology that's not quite up to the task. The regulations change a lot. We have to be transparent. This is all really pushing towards a decision management approach. So let's talk about going forward. We see where we've been and where we're at. And I think that going forward, we have some very exciting things. And the first one is DMN. And that's something that Jonathan mentioned at the start of this, the decision model and notation. Now, I'll preface this now saying this will not be a full primer on this standard. Certainly, there's a lot of resources we can point you to. There's a lot in here. But the idea is simply that we have got the ability to model decisions and recognize them as a key component of a business process, where we can identify a decision point in the process and then build a decision model underneath it. And we want to do this with a common notation that's understandable by all business users through the entire life cycle of development, from requirements all the way through maintenance. And at the same time, we're giving something that technical users are able to use to develop and maintain and manage systems as well. So we've really got a standardized bridge to cross that gap that too often exists between design and between implementation. And it's also something where, because it is a standard, we have now got the ability to interchange across organizations. It really gives us three things here. I mean, first, there is an implicit methodology. There's a rigor and a way and a process around decision analysis to put them in requirements understandable by both business and IT. There's, through the technology means, a way to implement and execute. And importantly for exchange, because it's a standard, anything that is written on a DMN compliant platform can be exchanged with any other platform compliant with that standard. And that is truly exciting. That's something that we have never seen in this industry before. So to give a brief example here, if we're starting with a typical business process, and this is here in BPMN for a very simple loan origination process, we don't want decision logic scattered all through here. We would get something that's going to be a little not as intuitive as we would like and understandable and pretty fragile. We wouldn't be able to handle change in it very well. But if we can identify the points where we have decision logic and then isolate and extract that from the business process, we can go through and get our decision. And then here, do the modeling piece so we have a clear separation of decision and process. More importantly, we can reuse all of these components. So if you've got a piece of logic or a decision that is used at multiple points in a process, you don't have to rewrite it every time for every process. You can point to the same decision model. That makes maintenance far easier, as there's no risk or worry of making sure that you've changed the model every time it may have appeared somewhere, you've got it in one place. Now, in many cases, and the thing that we look at most likely with DMN is that where the decision logic can be implemented via rules, we are able then to go and build a decision table or a rule to manage it. Now, there's a couple of things I would point out here that are very nice. First, this is a very user-friendly, business-friendly representation. A business user should be able to understand this and clearly see what's going on, and it's something that can be taken and implemented right away. It's a very powerful methodology and a very powerful approach. Now, as I mentioned, we're not meant to do a full primer on DMN. There is a DM community you can find online. We've seen literally dozens of new platforms that have been created to handle the DMN standard. Some of the legacy platforms have made themselves conformant with it. You've got innovative vendors like TrySnow Tech that have embraced all of the OMG standards. So you have BPMN for process, CMMN for case management, and DMN for decisions, all integrated on one platform. So really now what we got is the ability to both design and build. As a methodology, there's a framework to understand, analyze, document, and view rules. You can structure requirements in a very logical way and standardize the full process. In terms of a technology, you can rapidly change existing systems, give business users to truly own it, centralize persistence of the decisions, and even create a service-based enterprise for reusing it. Now, I would, caution you to say that overall, this is not just business rules. It's just not just for generating code. It's not just an IT asset, but rather you've got a full-blown approach to do a variety of things here, and can get all of the decisions, requirements, logic, and documentation in a single visual model. While we could talk at great length about both the design and the implementation part, I do want to focus some on the exchange piece. In the past, the business rule management systems, if you had two different platforms implementing the same decision logic, there was no way you could exchange between them. Each had their own proprietary language. It would be like trying to get a COBOL system to read Java code. Wasn't going to happen. But now with a standard, we've got some more opportunities available for us. We could actually think about disseminating the rules themselves or the decision logic in a DMN standard, or actually build out services of the decision models. These are really exciting possibilities here. With services, we kind of move from a software as a service to perhaps decisions as a service, or decisions on demand available as you need a particular piece of logic to execute. Or simply throw out the policy in terms of a DMN standard, and everybody on a compliant platform can load, read, and execute it as well. And it fits very nicely into where we've seen the software community move right now. Mobile being the new computing platform, you've got a very easy way to access this logic and have it available. Cloud is the new delivery platform, which of course fits easily and right into this. And the new apps are all disposable and reconfigurable, again, facilitated by the fact that we can have services or even code being sent out. So we enable a lot of really interesting stuff. So given that, what does this really mean for us? And again, I'm going to focus on the deployment and exchange here, and we'll talk about it generally and then with some specific examples. So now let's talk about a case where you've got an enterprise wanting to go share. For those of you in the US familiar with the mortgage industry, let's think about a place like Freddie Mac that has a variety and a large amount of seller-servicer baseline rules. Well, they can be able to deploy these and send these out actually via the rules in a DMN standard, or to set up services. They can send those out to their clients. They can send out to all the LOS systems that those clients might be on, or set up services to be enabled to actually execute those at whatever point in the process they may be needed. And I think the second case, which is one that isn't discussed as much, but could be equally important, is the idea of sort of a rule repository within an organization. We have seen a number of cases where very large enterprises that had a number of lines of business and were distributed geographically all across the country ended up building on different platforms and have no way of any kind of continuity between them. Well, now, if we have a central rule repository where we can either disseminate out the rules themselves or build services, we can easily reach all of the various silos or departments within an organization that previously may not have been able to get access to systems built somewhere else. It's a way to bring everything together internally. And now I'm going to talk very specifically about an example here, and Jonathan mentioned this earlier. So this is something that's applicable to the mortgage industry in the US. There may be something similar internationally in other industries. Certainly the insurance industry has got a similar standard. MISMO is the Mortgage Industry Standards and Maintenance Organization, part of the Mortgage Bankers Association. They've been around for quite a while now, and their goal was to develop technology standards for the mortgage industry. Now, to date, it really focused on a data standard. So the loan application, like you would typically see, could all be translated into an XML basis that every lender, every bank, every financial institution involved in a mortgage process can look at data and know that if you're talking about the property value, you're all speaking of the property value in the same way and in the same context. This is facilitated exchange within the mortgage industry. MISMO's mission has now changed and is growing to standardize how the mortgage industry communicates. So they want to get beyond data. As Jonathan mentioned, I have been part of a work group called BREW, the Business Rule Exchange Work Group, that basically looked at how a mortgage industry can exchange rules. It has been around for over a decade, and we really found out that there was no good way to do it before. We just couldn't handle everything. DMN is giving us this opportunity. So now we've got the data standard, and we are very close to officially announcing that DMN will be the officially recognized standard for the mortgage industry for exchange of decisions. And the combination of these two gives us the opportunity for something extremely powerful. There's just a very small decision model, and I mentioned CFPB before. They do something called reporting for HMDA, the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. Every lending institution has to report on all of the loans that were originated, and they send a lot of data back in that's relevant to the pieces that are part of HMDA. There are about 110 data elements, and as it turns out, there's a variety of rules and logic around every single element as to what gets returned. The CFPB sends out generally about 800 pages of written text for the regulations. That has to be interpreted and implemented because everybody has to be compliant with it. Middle and small tier lenders have had difficulty with it. They just don't have the resources to handle everything that needs to be done for it. It's really a classic DMN case for it. But what we have now is language and syntax for exchange. The decision model gives us the actual language of rules and decisions. And then within that, we have a mutual data standard. So all of the data elements we are writing rules to are the same for everybody. And this is, beyond exciting to have this capability in hand. I put this slide on here mainly because you can see that we're able to go through and represent the actual representation within MISMO of these data elements and then write logic against that. This puts everybody on the same page. So you can think about now in a future, we have DMN sitting out here. If an institution like CFPB needs to send out new regulations, well, we can simply send out that rule in terms of the DMN itself, and every agency that has a DMN platform can execute it directly. Or you could set up services to make the decisions or the pieces of decisions that are part of the process applicable to everybody. This brings everybody on board. So now it's just not the big players, but even the small players have the ability to get on board and comply with all the regulations out there and do it in a very reasonable fashion. It allows us now, because we put in a step, say, of defining the logic, to do data analysis and regression testing to identify gaps, exchange between trading partners. Really, the possibilities here are limitless, and I think it's going to be an extremely exciting future with this capability in hand. We have found the more people have seen this and visualize the concept, they're coming up with some very creative ideas and say, oh, do you mean we could do this now? And invariably the answer is yes. Because the future I'd like to see now is the idea where we've got a digital decision library, where before we had stacks and stacks and reams of paperwork and documents and regulations to screen through and try to determine how to implement everything in there. Let's not do that anymore, but rather let's make all of this accessible. Let's make all of the decisions and the models available to everybody, either through DMN itself that they can download and execute and run, or just via a service. You need a piece to do your HMDA compliance, let's pull that out. You need the newest underwriting regulations that may be applicable to the state of Georgia for sending in loans to Fannie Mae, let's get that down here and let's execute it. Management becomes easy. Deployment then is a piece of cake, and we can have something extremely powerful. The last thing I want to speak of here, and just do it very briefly, is digital transformation. And I think this term probably gets used a lot and gets overused for a lot of things, but I think it's got a role, or everything we're talking about here with decision management has a role. It's often just defined as some technologies, but it's really not just re-automating your platform and making it mobile or putting things on the cloud. You really need to transform with these technologies to bring values to customers. It's been estimated that as many as 40% of the companies that are on the S&P 500 in 2014 won't even be around by 2024. It's really critical to transform your enterprise. That has to be done. And by measuring what's really important to your customers, your ultimate client, challenging your current operating models, you've got a way to make it easier to serve those clients that are so important to you. Now, I think that you can see some combinations of things and where decision management plays in for some of the other areas that you probably have heard about. Artificial intelligence. We have massive amounts of data out there. I mean, there are hundreds and thousands and millions of loans out we could potentially mine data from and use analytics within them to challenge the decisions and rules we have. Maybe loan to value ratios of 75% should be 77%. I view it as being a very complementary technology. And one of the ways it can be most complementary is by providing a way to have auditable decisioning incorporated in DMN, so you don't just have a AI black box, which is how it is often viewed. Robotic process automation, by integrating process rather than systems and applications, the procedural logic can, with decision logic, can make this a lot more powerful and eliminate subjective decision making. Blockchain, one of the really hot topics here right now. A decision model or DMN itself could be part of the blockchain method that's part of a distributed ledger that is passed around, so we know it has not been changed. The idea of smart contracts, self-executing contracts, where the contract is really code, is something we could look at with DMN as well. So I think we've got a lot of incredibly interesting complementary technologies that with decision management are going to be some very powerful tools to move forward with in the future. I talked a lot of this at a very high level. There's pieces of this we can go into much more depth of, but I really wanted to give a taste for where I see a lot of these things headed, where they've started to go, and what will be hopefully some amazing potential going forward. Maybe saying we have it all is a little bit over the top, but we are able to retain and enhance the ability for business users to actually manage this and have standards that ensure consistency and transparency. We've got the technology to implement, execute, and deploy in a variety of ways, and can meet the needs of a new user base. And this is where the concepts of mobile and cloud and apps really comes into play. But the new capabilities around Exchange can really usher in a new area of communication. My contact information is down here, and I'm sure Jonathan will have that available as well. I did want to do a quick plug for the DMN Gang of Four. You might see our hashtag around, but my company, along with TrySnow Tech, which has a platform built with Red Hat, training by our partner Bruce Silver with Method and Style. We do services and implementation and can kind of bring a full package solution across the board here. And always going to be very excited to work with any and all of you to answer questions, help with your implementations or re-implementations going forward. That's all I have here today. And we'll get Jonathan on board and take a look at a few questions.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Brian. It was as always very interesting and entertaining, especially at the end. What I liked is the wrap up and how you associated the DMN decision management with other aspects of digital transformation and AI, RPA, blockchain even. And how all of this can be integrated to create this value that I was talking about earlier. So I looked very quickly. I know that I had some questions, but 5 of those 5 questions were, can you send us the recording? So I'll do that, but I have
Sure.
another real question here. So we have Jay here. I wish Brian would have used a customer example. So we have Jay who's interested in use cases. So I know that this is pretty it's theoric. So
let me give you one that we are working on right at this minute, actually. So hopefully that'll help approach this. When I first mentioned MISMO, and I happened to show the picture of the residential loan application there, Fannie and Freddie Mac have been working on a universal residential loan application. You may not know it, but to date there have been several out there that have underlying structures technically that are different. They are working on a single unified model that is, I believe by 2019, everybody is going to use. We are building the model for that internally in a DMN structure. And it does have some conditionality built in, depending on if a loan is ultimately going to be going to Freddie Mac and their automated underwriting system loan prospector, or to Fannie Mae with underwriter. So all of that logic, there is certain logic that goes if you've got an FHA or a VA loan. So that underlying structure and all of that logic we are building out right now. So you've got a baseline platform that can be sent out to LOS systems, to users of these systems, basically to get them set with that first step going forward.
Thanks, Brian. We have another one here. I don't know if you'll be comfortable with this one, but I'll just read it very quickly. So we have Marge here asking, is there any ways to internally inside of an organization to help selling, the DMN practice and the decision management practice inside of an organization? Like, what are the main arguments to be using?
Sure. I mean, no, that's a really, really good question, because, ultimately when you come down to want to look at this, you've got to go sell it to somebody internally. A lot of the times, and I think I mentioned this at the very first, addressing the pain points, not being able to manage change sufficiently, not being able to be transparent in the representations and have business users involved, or having to force IT to make the changes to business logic, which is not necessarily where you want to be. We have always found over the years that the business side of an organization gravitates towards these approaches first, sees the value in it. In the past, IT has been more hesitant. I see that beginning to change a little bit now with something like DMN, which is less intrusive to their systems. But if you can easily build out a prototype, no matter how small it may be, to one of the areas that your organization deals with, it's easy to, with any DMN tool, I mean, they really facilitate doing rapid prototypes, build something out, show that you can deploy a decision model that can be exchanged quickly, that you can execute, that you can throw out a service for in a front end. This is not anything that's going to be a major time-consuming effort. Visualizing and seeing it for real as opposed to on paper is always the biggest selling point. But find an area that's hitting those pain points, maybe get the business side to buy in first. Do a prototype. I mean, that, in my mind, is always going to make the most successful sale.
Yeah, definitely, and I'll just add very quickly that we have a free trial available for a DMN modeler. So if you already have your kind of prototype or example that you would want to build in order to sell it internally, or just to spark those conversations with your colleagues or other people internally, it's always possible to do it using a trial, which is free. You have it for 30 days. And if you have, of course, you need to have a good idea of what you want to build, because it's only 30 days, but still we can work things out. We can work on proof of concepts with Brian helping us as well. So there are many ways that you can sell DMN internally, and I'm sure Brian's got a lot of arguments in his pocket. So we have also Brian. We have a friend of yours, Jonathan Halprin, who is asking about OMG and the updates on the standards. So is there a planned schedule or updates coming? You may be closer to them than I am. I know that you can check regularly on their websites, but
I can tell you that there is a version 1.2 in the works. I am not completely sure of the release date, but I seem to recall it will be this spring. And I got the sense it was largely a cleanup update. Now, I know that as this has gotten out and people have been working with it, there have been a few things pointed out and saying, gosh, wouldn't it be handy if we could do this? Or how about this piece? And there is the group, the board in OMG that put together this standard really has, the industry leaders working on this. People that I've known in the industry for decades, and you've got big name players like IBM and Oracle and FICO involved. So, they're representing and doing the things that are truly important, and it's just not some whim that looks kind of neat to me, and we're putting together good stuff. Version 1.2, I think, will be out and recognized fairly soon, and I think you'll see those modifications as needed reflected in the platforms really quickly afterwards. I think I mentioned the DM community. If you look out there, among other things, you can see a fairly up-to-date listing of the platforms that are around. You and not just because TrySnow Tech sponsored this. I think there's little doubt they're the industry leader right now in terms of the robustness of the platform, and certainly with the integration with the other OMG standards. We only briefly mentioned Red Hat, but they've been doing a lot of work on the underlying execution engine. So very solid there, but I think it'll continually evolve over time, get things cleaned up, and add new features as appropriate.
Definitely. Thanks, Brian, for this. We have Avinash here. How to convince? Well, it's pretty much the same question that we got earlier. So how to convince the enterprise to leverage DMN for industries other than mortgage? I don't know if you have something to.
Well, sure. Yeah, and it's the same thing. I mean, a lot of times we go back to the pain points, those same ideas of we have regulations, we have rules. They're coming into us very rapidly. they change all of the time. And that typically is the biggest thing with any of these regulations. They're volatile, whether they be for compliance or for sales. If there's things you need to change that is your logic for your company to be competitive or to get ahead of your competitors, this is a way to manage that change and make it very quickly. And think of it beyond, say, just compliance or doing your basic business. The very fact that you can throw out new logic very quickly can enable you to get ahead of your competition. Now, I know a study we did when I was with Freddie Mac and implemented business rules. So on one of those older legacy platforms, they were able to put a new product out and get everything done and in the systems about 4 times faster than they used to be able to. Now, if they can do that 4 times faster, that enables them to get ahead of their, at the time, competition, Fannie Mae. That's sort of one big happy family now. But those sorts of things, getting out in front and just the speed and quickness that you can build something new, test it, deploy it out rapidly, is a tremendous facility to have. We talked a lot about just keeping up with your needs in terms of compliance, but so many other possibilities here for what you can do that it's almost endless there. So look for those sorts of places where you're either falling behind or want to get ahead, and really empower your business side to take control of that change. And I think that's where your sell internally gets a lot more powerful.
Thank you once again. We have another one from Jay here. I think you're going to like that one. So he says that writing rules on top of MISMO often have been really complex for business users. Are you finding it easier by using DMN? Is DMN mature enough to handle this complexity?
Yeah, we are actually finding out to date, and that's something I really kind of stressed, or I wanted to stress on an earlier response, is that people seeing this on paper, it resonated so far to a certain point. When we were able to show demos of things and show what they were seeing, then we got a lot of, oh, that's cool, can I do this? I will tell you that I think we found people find the actual MISMO data standard harder to work with than the DMN itself. There are things that we are working also now in MISMO in terms of a business glossary and some other things like that that will be helpful. But yeah, this is putting things into a context now with decision tables and other features in DMN where this logic makes sense. And being able to sit down, the business users themselves, and really articulate what a decision model looks like, where it fits into a business process, and then what the rules underneath that are. People in the mortgage industry are used to working with grids and Excel, and a decision table is not a far cry from that. So yeah, I think we're seeing more acceptance than we would have with the traditional business rule platforms.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. So still have one last question here, but it's a very specific case here. So Marge, we'll just get back to you on a more personal note on these ones. So these are some questions about proof of concept and doing this, not necessarily with, I don't know if you have a comment on this, but someone here is trying to figure out, is it possible to create this prototype or proof of concept without the actual tool or without training?
Without any, you can certainly go to the OMG site and download the DMN standard. And there are several books now that are available on Amazon by people like Bruce Silver and James Taylor that discuss the DMN methodology. So you can learn some from that. Because there is a certain, the diagrams have a certain Visio-like feel. Yeah, if you really wanted to, you could start to figure out how the decision model would work and build it with Visio and get Excel and write some decision tables down. a bare bones way to get through and get started with it. But as Jonathan mentioned, I think there is at least a 30-day trial with TrySnow Tech. So when you've got the real pieces there, that's always easier. But if you're a good self-learner, I think with the resources there, you could certainly start doing some modeling on your own in a variety of ways.
Yep, definitely. Definitely. It's always good to be a good self-learner in these, I think, if you want to be able to explain and to sell it internally. I think the self-documentation really is something important. So I think we'll just end up like this. We have some comments, but no particular questions have been left unanswered. So, well, thank you very much, Brian. It's been it was a great presentation. We received a lot of appreciation comments, so I think it was much appreciated from everybody that was there. So
I thank you all for taking the time to join us here today and for the questions. The more we hear from people out that are interested or working with it, the better off the standard and the services and the platforms will become. So your input is very, very much appreciated.
Yep, that's it. It's a two-way conversation. I think we learn almost as much as the attendees learn when we do those kinds of webinars and people are asking some questions. So we see what are the topics to focus on our side of things as well. So once again, thank you very much, and everybody that's left here. I'll just send an email probably tomorrow during the day with a link to the recording. We'll also put the PowerPoint slides available so you can use them, and it's also maybe another selling point to your colleagues or other business teams. So once again, thank you, Brian, and have a good rest of the day, everybody.